Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another rousing podcast here at HID. I've got some very esteemed guests today, both fellow HIDers. I'm going to start, Scott, with you. You're a little newer to the HID team, also in the workforce BU with me. My understanding is a bit in kind of the fintech, telecom, financial services. Give me a quick thumbnail on your background, and then Rachel, start thinking about what yours is too.
Sure. Former manager of software development for a
Okay.
large telecom, and then a
Okay.
project manager in the financial services space, also a
Okay.
fintech entrepreneur.
Okay. So no shortage in familiarity with complex systems. Awesome. Great to have you on our pre-sales team then. And then Rachel, I am super excited to have you on. We normally just have members of our team on, so it's great to have a different area of the business on. This kind of with the RTLS team with the within HID. So that's super exciting. And now, if I understand, you are both a nurse, an expert in security, as well as I think you're on um, the IAHSS chapter in Houston. Is that right?
No, that's correct. I'm a nurse, once a nurse, always a nurse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Over
Okay.
at the St. Anthony's out of Amarillo, Texas, on a skilled nursing unit. Also was PRN, and my specialty was with geriatrics. And like you mentioned, I've been on the security integration side, both on manufacturing and on the installation piece of it
Mhm.
for the last 15 years. And then, bringing that together, I've been on the board for the Greater Houston chapter the last 3
Awesome.
years now,
Cool.
chair of that board. And I've just worked with some fantastic
Awesome.
people regarding the IHSS team that's here local, but abroad as well.
That is awesome. I love this. We have a real expert vet here, and then Scott and I are just here to add in a little bit of extra talking points. So, well, I think we are going to discuss the recent show y'all were both at. I think that was out in Phoenix a couple of weeks back, and I'm going to be really excited to hear what y'all have to say. So, with that, let's get started. What did you think of this year's show?
I personally thought it was one of the best shows that I've been to in the last 4 years. The attendance was an all-time high. I think they said it was around 922 members that attended this year's conference. So from that perspective, just the foot traffic. Also, it was just the engagement, the one-on-ones that we were having with the members. They were a lot deeper and wider, but with the focus kind of on the workplace violence, right? And so,
Mhm.
anyways, for me, it was just a good takeaway.
Awesome. And Scott, fresh here, first show. What did you think?
Sure. As a newbie coming into this, very impressed with the different exhibitors, the speakers, just the crowd in general. Uh, yeah, it was good to be there.
Awesome. Well, I think one thing you had talked about when we were prepping this was you noticed kind of this sense of community around certain topics that were pervasive for like really everyone there. And I think y'all gave a presentation or a talk or something like that. And I think you spent a lot of time on workplace violence prevention. Um, Whichever one of you wants to start first, kind of do a quick recap of what y'all talked through and kind of what was the point you were trying to make while y'all were there.
Really, it was about caring for your frontline workers, and so caring for your caregivers, right? We got to
Yeah.
protect them. There's a lot of things going on with shortages of staff, high
Hmm. Yep.
turnover, and the way that it's coming at these clinical workers, it's from every angle. And so the focus
Yeah.
of our talk was really on that particular piece from a staff safety standpoint. And so that was our focus throughout in the message that we had in our presentation.
Awesome.
The numbers are staggering, right?
Right.
When you're looking at 41% of nurses planning to transition out of the workforce within 2 years, you've got major problems with
Yep.
retaining staff as well as attracting staff when they see that high turnover.
Yep.
We looked at the costs to just the healthcare industry in general and to individual hospitals. It's hard to stay in front of that.
No, it really is. And like it's not just pennies in a bucket. We're looking
Yeah.
at $4 to $6 million per healthcare IDN. So to Scott's point, it's just mind blowing what it's costing these hospitals. And so you know, the focus is how do you retain them? How do you protect them, right? In today's environments and in the hospitals. So again, it's just really was coming in and honing on that.
So just to be clear for anyone listening or watching, if you're watching this, what y'all are suggesting is the preponderance of violence towards those staff members is a direct causal link to, or strongly correlated link to, the retention issues, is what y'all are both saying. It's what I think I'm hearing. Is that right? Is that fair?
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And it's not just coming from one direction, right? It's coming from, you know, perpetrators from the outside of the healthcare systems that doesn't know anybody, right? And so I don't want to step on anything that the message that you want to convey, but it's not just one audience that is the threat in hospitals today.
I think that's important because you had mentioned the different categories of workplace violence, generally who is perpetrating that. And so I think that's a really important one because I think it's something we can come up with later, and it's a different risk vector if you've got someone staff on staff versus, you know, domestic versus just unintentional. I won't say accidental, but, you know, an escalating situation that's maybe not the other ones. Rachel, I believe you are a member of the Houston chapter of IAHSS, and what are some of the discussion topics in that peer group and some of the other chapters? Is this kind of number one for everyone right now?
It's definitely high on the priority list when you talk about workplace violence. You know, you have workplace violence teams, you have your public safety directors, you also have your security safety teams. And this is top of mind, but it's just kind of like one piece of it.
Yeah.
Even though it's a high priority, we took a poll amongst all IAHSS members, and in that poll stats, it came back that, you know, over 50%, it's a top priority. But then some are stating that it's not a top priority. And then some of the reason why they go with a staffed arrest or solution, you know, to mitigate some of these things is because a governing body is telling them that they have to. And so again, we're having to look at healthcare from a different standpoint when it comes to staffed arrests because of all these factors that I'm talking about right now.
So you got a combination of just the violence and the prevalence of it, but then there's external state, CMS, industry groups like Joint Commission, and then kind of that patient visitor experience that I know we've also discussed. The CHAPS, CHAPS, I can never remember how to say the score that you get.
There's the HCAP scores. And so with that, you know, that's about the patient experience. And that's become huge amongst all the different hospitals that are out there, is that patient experience while they're staying at that hospital, right? And so we have to take all those things in considerations. And those are challenges that all hospitals are having. You know, cybersecurity is another one out there that they have to take in consideration in protecting that patient information, right? And so, again, these are challenges not to a single hospital, but for all healthcare entities.
And so if there is a multitude of challenges, a lot of them have some commonalities amongst them. What's keeping them from starting to address them in some way, shape, or form? It feels like maybe there's not stagnation, but maybe it's just there's concern of where to get started, maybe in some of this.
I think that's part of it. A lot of times you're looking at retrofitting an existing hospital, right? And so what's the cost associated with retrofitting? And is it going to disrupt the workflow that they already have in place? And so these are all things they have to take in consideration. And then where are the most vulnerable areas? Is it their ER or ED, or, you know, is it their, you know, labor and delivery floor? And so these are all things that have to be taken in consideration. I think too, you know, things that we talk about when it comes to staffed arrests is it accessible, right? And if it's accessible, you know, how do you deploy it? And will it talk to our other systems like our EMR system or our video system or even our access control system? These are all things like talking about utilizing the infrastructure of what they have today and then the cost associated with it.
Yeah. Scott, go ahead.
Sorry about that.
To ask you a question. Go ahead.
Rachel was pointing out, you're looking at leveraging previous investments and capital expenditures with your infrastructure, reusing the Wi-Fi network you already have. But then there's that other part that Rachel talked about during our talk at IAHSS, which was picking out the right system. And one thing that I learned was some of the former, or previous generations actually had an audio alarm or an audible alarm, which would actually escalate the situation, and then your duress button actually works against you. And that was surprising. Interesting takeaway for me there.
No, absolutely.
Rachel, I know y'all talked about this in some of the trainings that IAHSS does themselves. Anything that escalates is bad. Whether it's a big red button that says, I'm going to press here. I'm joking. I don't know whether those do or don't exist. Hopefully not on someone's shirt.
Be surprised.
Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. Or it's, the person that's receiving a patient visitor, Scott, this kind of gets more into our area, and having to ask for certain documentation, probably a governmental ID. Who are you here to see? Why are you here to see? Some of those things, any of that creates friction for the person coming. Because I know, Rachel, that's one of the biggest drivers of some of the forms of violence, is that friction and that unnecessary escalation. And I'm assuming that is part of what some of these safety committees and safety programs are looking to address, right, Rachel, is how to move it forward and do so from a kind of a human aspect, not just about the technology, but what are the things that we can also be doing on the human side of this?
No, absolutely. I mean, you make a good point. I mean, part of it is accessible, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of legacy systems that are out there today, but are they accessible is the first question you should ask yourself or your team, right? Yeah. And if it's on a wall or under a desk or at a laptop, that's not where a lot of these incidents happen. It's typically in a patient room, in the ER. So when we talk about mitigating the risk associated with, someone attacking, whether it be clinical staff or someone else in the room, another patient, right? It needs to be accessible. And so a lot of times we'll talk about the form factor, right? Yeah. Is it something that they can get their hands on immediately? And if they are putting their hands on it, is it going to alert the attacker? And so it really needs to focus on how accessible and then how easy is it to deploy. Those are two big factors that always come up and that we have to address.
So with it right there, you've got, I guess, greater proximity to trigger the alarm, and you can kind of head this off at the pass, really sending that message to your security staff to respond before it escalates and becomes a larger problem.
No, absolutely. A real-time solution, right? You don't want it to be forensic or after the fact. We want to be able to address this before it actually happens so that we can mitigate the issues, right? And is it happening frequently in specific areas, seeing trends, right? So that you can address that with your internal teams at the hospitals. And so that's a big thing that's always discussed amongst the IAHSS peers is, having that risk plan, and then also the training aspect of it, training your clinical team, your security team, so that you're both singing from the same page of music.
Yeah. And Scott, I know on our side, because I think you bring up a really good point, there's ways of getting ahead of some of the really bad stuff, move some of the decisions to the left. And I know on our side, there's a key aspect of our visitor management system within the healthcare space are watch lists, whether that's an external watch list. Boy, I'm getting all fuzzy on the screen here. Whether that's an external watch list or an internal watch list, and using those as a way to create intelligence internally without maybe alerting someone that, boy, Scott's he's a bad actor.
I think a lot of the power of the watch list comes from its ability to scale across multiple locations. Oftentimes our customers are larger healthcare providers. And so if we can keep them out of one building and they come over to another building, that's fantastic because we already have them on the watch list.
I think that's a great point. And I think another aspect of that, because you mentioned the I'm going to butcher it again, the HCAPS. There, I got it right that time. A second ago, Rachel, watch list, we think of it as a way to keep people out. There's also the positive side. There's a way to use that as a way to create a more welcoming experience if maybe it's someone that needs a little extra help, or making that a little different. So there's goods and bads, and there's good ways to deploy technology on both sides of that. So what's the biggest impediment from the human side, you think, Rachel, that's keeping us moving forward? We address the technology. We can deploy quickly, get up and running quickly, sit alongside. What's the human side keeping us from moving it?
The human side is whether it's a high priority at that healthcare organization, right? And then getting the funds allocated for the project so that it happens sooner than later. There's some bills that are being passed and more state and federal involvement that we're seeing out there, which is a good thing. But I think that sometimes we'll stump a project depending on, what they see internally as a priority or not. And so you got to get all those stakeholders together to form, a roundabout. This is what we're going to implement. This is what we're going to teach our clinical staff to use. And part of that process is like, it's not just for security, right? You got to get the buy-in from your clinical teams. And so that might mean that you have to show them the type of solution that you're going to invest in as a workplace violence team, right? And get the feedback from that team and then carry that forward. Because if you don't do that, you're going to have a lot of resistance using it out in the field. And that's the last thing that you want from your team that has to use this every day. If they're a part of that process, you're going to get better buy-in. And we've seen this time and time again. You don't want a general contractor or an architectural firm deciding that. You want to bring your teams into the fold.
Exactly. So Rachel's talking about getting that staff buy-in and then training that staff to use it effectively, so they're all comfortable with it. That's a fantastic point, Rachel. Thank you.
No, I mean, from that, it's building out the internal processes. Like, you can install the staff safety system, but if you don't have the protocols internally, how you're going to respond to that, that's just as important. We're one piece of the equation over here on the HID RTLS team, but it's really having, what do you do next when you do have the aggressor that's attacking? What happens when you do press that alarm button, right? And then it goes out to dispatch. What's the next step?
Yeah, policies and procedures seem like a good starting point in a lot of these cases. And obviously that goes with, you talked about the regulators, you talked about the industry groups, you've talked about needing to take a risk-based approach. Say that 5 times fast, but I clearly cannot. And it seems like that's ultimately where you need to spend the time and the effort once you do some of this, is how are we going to codify this into a set of policies, create the procedures internally, and then train the crap out of it so that everyone knows how to do this and it's not awkward. I think you make a good point. If you're not bringing in, we've seen it in some of our deals on our side, Scott, if we're not bringing the nurse staff into the early stages of the adoption of this, they're just not going to. And it's not necessarily because they don't want to, but when they're in their day-to-day, that's not when you introduce new technology. You need to have done it well before that so that by that point they're comfortable with it. So, well, thank you both very much. We're hitting almost about 30 minutes here. Any takeaways from either of you? Scott, why don't you go first, and then we'll let Rachel wrap us.
I would say really take a look at any new system you're implementing and make sure you're not building another silo, but adding something to the fold that interacts with every other piece, so you just get more mileage out of it, more bang for your buck.
Love that. Rachel?
Yeah, that's perfect segue into what I wanted to also convey as a message. Is a lot of the folks that I talked to said, we don't just need staff arrest. We also need, the use cases of RTLS for asset management. We also need for, the wayfinding use. So I think they're looking at it holistically now with the Smarter Hospital initiative. And so with that, staff arrest is just one piece of it, but then you've got the infant security. And then you also have, for the high risk elopement, being able to track those types of patients. It's the workflows, it's environmental monitoring. And so the conversations may start here, but then they just continue. And I think if you have a system that can grow with the customer's needs, that's what's really important. I think that's what HID really does well, is like, we're not only at the physical access control or visitor management, we're all pieces that fit into that hospital because we're built for healthcare, right?
Yep.
And so that was my biggest takeaway is that, you know, the systems that we have, it's specifically meant for healthcare.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I couldn't have had a better commercial if I tried. So it's almost like you do this for a living, Rachel. Well, awesome. Well, thank you both. I love this topic. Healthcare is a very important topic for us to discuss. With the impending, you know, retention challenges that especially hospitals are going to have, this is a topic we need to continue to discuss and discuss it in pragmatic ways. So I appreciate both of y'all doing that, sharing some of your knowledge, and I look forward to doing this again. This was kind of fun. I like this. New voices, new faces. So, well, thank you both very much, and tune in for whatever our next topic is going to be. We talk about healthcare frequently. We also have other verticals we cover here within the Identity and Access Management Systems group. And Rachel Nolan, thank you for joining us from your RTLS group. Scott, it's good to see you. And thanks for joining for your first time. I'll invite you back. Don't worry.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Rachel.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Everyone have a great day.